All right, lying on your backs. Just begin to feel your connection. Feel how you sense your shoulders. So many people walk around life thinking with their heads and holding themselves up with their shoulders. The stresses of the season, the stresses of life. So many people seem to have created all kinds of imaginative ways to believe that somehow they can hold these stresses of life up from their shoulders. So how do you do that? Feel your right shoulder and what parts of it are touching the floor. Your shoulder blade. When I say shoulder, do you actually think about the shoulder joint, or are you thinking about your upper back as it connects into your neck? That place that always feels so good when somebody squeezes and rubs it. Feel how your right and left arms are resting on the floor. Sense how your shoulders connect into your spine. Your shoulder blades are connected only through the muscles, but they wrap forward to the collarbone and connect onto the sternum. So feel the core of yourself, that which lies between your sternum and your spine. Feel the space in between the back of your sternum and the front of your spine. And track how you imagine your spine as resting on the floor. You can feel the very back of your spine and the pressure, the feedback it gives your brain. But then there's the front of your spine, the vertebral bodies that are resting deep in your core. Track these vertebrae all the way down into the little forward curve in your low back as it curves back to the floor, and you feel your sacrum resting on the floor again. And notice, does your pelvis lean a little bit to the right or to the left? A little more weight on one side than the other? And do these normal and natural asymmetries disturb you? Or can you just relax and say, isn't that interesting, how I organize this body of mine? And sensing also the weight of your legs, the right leg and the left leg. Bring your attention to your arms, and in a moment I'm going to ask you to lift one of your arms up. And notice which arm your attention goes to lift up first. And then very slowly make a very gentle and effortless movement to raise that arm up just an inch or two and drop it back down to the floor. Just feel the weight of your arm. Do this 2 or 3 times. Feel how you use your shoulder. Is there any connection into your upper back and neck? And then shift your attention to the opposite arm. And see if you can tell, once you lift the opposite arm, why your attention went to the arm that it did go to. Was that arm somehow easier to lift? Lighter? More effortless? Or not? Just see if you can notice any differences. And then roll onto your right sides, please. And bend your hips and knees so that they're each at about a 90-degree angle. So your thigh comes out from your pelvis at 90 degrees, and then your knees bend at about 90 degrees. And if there's anything uncomfortable about this position for you, find a way to make it comfortable. Use whatever pillows or props you need. If you can rest with your head on the floor, do that. If you need a pillow under your head, that is fine also. And mirror what's happening in your legs with your arms, so that your left arm is resting on top of your right arm. Elbows are touching. Your upper arm comes out from your trunk at about 90 degrees, and your elbows are bent at about 90 degrees. And just begin to slide your left shoulder a little forward and back to the middle. And go slowly enough that you can feel that first place of effort. Can it just roll forward and back to the middle without any exertion, without any strain? And if you were to try to slide your shoulder any more forward, what would you be pushing through? What parts of your body resist or hold you in this position? Do you feel anything in front of you, in your chest or your clavicle, the front of your neck? Or does the resistance come from behind you in your neck or your back? Or maybe below your shoulder in your ribs somewhere. Or maybe you have no idea, and that's fine too. As you continue to slide your shoulder forward, let your neck relax so that your head rolls a little towards the floor as you roll your shoulder forward, and back to neutral as you bring it back to neutral. So your shoulder comes forward and your head rolls down to the floor to its right. And then everything comes back to neutral. And what else rolls forward? Your shoulder, your head. What about your ribs? Does your shoulder invite your ribs and your spine to roll forward to the right? Do your ribs speak to your spine in any way? And is there the possibility of feeling the influence of this movement all the way down to your pelvis? For some of you, you might even feel suggestions in your legs. Not actual movements, but just the influence of the movement through your whole system. And then just pause for a moment. Noticing, where does your mind go? Does it notice parts of your body, or does it begin to wander off and think and plan and remember and worry and dream? And bring your mind back to your body now, and begin to slide your shoulder a little backwards. So you might even feel how your shoulder blade slides backwards on your ribs, sliding back and coming back to neutral. And what's taking your shoulder backwards like compared to how you took it forwards? Is this a more pleasant movement? Do you feel neutral about it? Easier or harder? And if you were to force your shoulder to go to its full range of motion, what would you have to push through? Making this very gentle movement as far as is easy in a comfortable range. If you went just a little further, and don't necessarily go further, but just feel, where is that resistance in your body from easily going farther? Again, is it in the front of your neck, your clavicle, your chest? Maybe you feel it up in your upper back and neck, or somewhere around your shoulder blade, or even down into the sides of your ribs. what if you let your neck relax so that each time you gently slide your shoulder backwards, you let your head roll up towards the ceiling, turning it to the left. Somehow making the connection that as your shoulder goes back, it's actually inviting your head along. So that there's a part of you that's not making your head do anything other than letting go and following the movement that's being initiated at the shoulder, which is rolling back and coming back to neutral. And again, what else can slide backwards? What else does the shoulder invite besides the neck and head? Feeling the influence on the ribs as they begin to roll back. And of course the ribs are connected to your spine, so can you feel a subtle rotation in the spine, turning to the left? And does that influence carry at all, even the slightest amount, down into your pelvis, your hips, or your legs? And notice how far down yourself do you feel the influence of the movement? Where does it stop? Maybe it stops right at the shoulder and the shoulder blade, and that's fine. But have we piqued your curiosity about what else could potentially be happening in the rest of your body? And then do the whole movement forward and back, taking your shoulder in its very comfortable and effortless range, forward and back, letting your head roll with it forward and back, feeling how much of the rest of your trunk can easily roll forward and back. And continuing that movement with your left shoulder, take your head in the opposite direction. So as your shoulder rolls forward, turn your head to the left gently, and as your shoulder rolls backward, turn your head down towards the floor to the right. And does that change anything in your breathing? Do you tighten anywhere? Can you make this just as soft and as effortless as it was when your head was rolling in the same direction? And then let your head roll again in the same direction as your shoulder, feeling your left side moving forward and back, and noticing that although your left side is moving, what is happening on your right side? How does your right side support this movement? Does the weight shift in some way forward and back through your right shoulder or the right side of your ribs? Across the side of your head? And next time you're rolling your left shoulder back, keep taking it back and back and back and back until eventually it rolls you onto your whole back. Just breathing, no hurry, just slowly feeling. How can your left shoulder invite your whole body onto your back? And once there, just pause. And where does your mind go to sense yourself? Do you sense what's different, what feels good? Has anything softened? Or is your mind trained to feel the sore places, the tight places, the limited places? Just notice. There can be an addictive quality to noticing over and over and over again that which causes us discomfort. So how do we retrain our brain to be interested in all the other parts of our body that provide support and well-being? Feel how your left arm now rests on the floor compared to your right arm. Your left shoulder blade and your right shoulder blade. Even your left and right legs, for some of you, may be experiencing differences in the sensations of how they're resting on the floor, even though no intentional movement was happening there. Feel how your spine rests deep within you, from your sacrum in the low, low back, all the way up to the base of your head. And sense the space from side to side between your right shoulder joint and your left shoulder joint, and how that crosses the vertical up and down of the spine with the horizontal side to side of the shoulders. And again, roll onto your right side, please, in the same configuration. Notice how you're resting here now. Make yourself as comfortable as possible. And begin lifting your left shoulder ever so gently up towards your left ear and back to neutral. Just gently feeling that little bit of a lift and dropping it down to neutral. Now, some people will begin to lift their left shoulder and then it'll sort of want to stay there as if you've discovered a new neutral. Or you'll actually feel like you have to lower it back down to neutral. Our shoulder muscles are really programmed in all kinds of interesting ways, few of which include just allowing the shoulders to be held up by the skeleton. So just notice how your muscles think they're supposed to be holding you together and protecting you from all of the burdens of the world. And feel the distance from your earlobe to the tip of your shoulder. As you lift your shoulder up, that distance is closer together. And as you lower it down, feel how the distance between your earlobe and the tip of your shoulder is farther away. And then next time you lift your shoulder up towards your earlobe, hold it there, and imagine that you tied a string through your earlobe to the tip of your shoulder, so that when you lower your shoulder back to neutral, it actually lifts your head up from the floor or from your pillow. And when you lower your head back down to the floor, your shoulder comes up. Try that movement a few times. So the distance between the tip of your shoulder and your earlobe always stays approximately the same. How do you organize yourself to lift your head in concert with the lowering of your shoulder? What do you do with the ribs on your left side as they come closer together? And what do you do with the ribs on the right side? Do they press into the floor to provide you with support in some way? Or maybe it's your right shoulder that presses into the floor. But in all actions, a part of us is providing us with the stability to move, while the other part of us gives us the mobility for that movement. So far, some would call this a left-sided lesson. But without your right side, the left side could not be doing what it's doing and making such discoveries. And then just rest your head down and rest your shoulder for a moment. Now just a few times intentionally lower your shoulder towards your pelvis and back to neutral. In fact, rest your whole left arm along your side so that your wrist is sort of resting along your pelvis and your hand drapes down across the back of your thigh or buttock area. And with your arm in this configuration, now lower your shoulder down so you're really lengthening your arm, almost as if getting it closer to the floor underneath you, and then bring it back to neutral. Lengthen it down and back to neutral several times. And feel, would you be able to lengthen your head down further if you allowed your head to lift? So try that a few times. As you lower your shoulder, let your head lift. Does your hand come more closely to the floor? And again, what's happening on the right side? Your right shoulder and arm, the ribs on the right, even into your pelvis. How is this movement felt throughout your whole self, supported by parts of yourself? And then let your head rest. And this time bring your attention down to your pelvis. Instead of lowering your shoulder towards your pelvis, can you shift your pelvis in such a way so that you shift your pelvis up towards your shoulder, towards your left armpit? What's that side-to-side motion? So that your pelvis raises and your pelvis and shoulder get a little closer together. Your whole left side gets a little shorter, while your whole right side on the floor lengthens on the floor to provide the support for your left shoulder and the left side of your pelvis to get closer together. And then what happens when you lengthen the shoulder and pelvis away from each other, going ahead and involving both the shoulder and the pelvis, lengthening them away, so the pelvis drops in the direction of the floor and the shoulder comes up towards your ear, and then you bring them closer together. And then just pause for a moment. And keeping your knees touched together, you're going to pivot on your knees, raising your left foot up towards the ceiling. So just raise your left foot up and lower it back down. Doing this several times and asking yourself, what does this have to do with the movements we've been doing with my shoulder, with my ribs, with my pelvis? And see if you can begin to feel the invitation of how your foot raises towards the ceiling, causing a rolling or a rotation movement in your left thigh. And that rotation connects up into your hip joint, into your pelvis. And for many of you, can invite your pelvis to go up a little bit towards your shoulder. So what happens if next time you raise your left foot towards the ceiling, you also lower your left shoulder and your right hand down towards the floor? Does your left hand begin to get closer and closer to touching the floor behind your buttocks? You could even lift your head, feeling the whole left side of your body getting a little shorter, and the whole right side of your body lengthening across the floor. I like to think of the ribs like an accordion. So one side, all the ribs are coming together, and on the other side they're opening and fanning apart as you play beautiful music with your body. And then roll onto your back and rest for a moment. Feel the influence now. Feel the left upper back, the left shoulder and shoulder blade, the left side of your ribs, your hip and buttock, and your left leg. The mobility side. And compare that to the sensations on the right side, the side that's been providing you the stability. And you may already know within yourself which side tends to be your stability side and which side tends to be your mobility side. And although it can be both your right and left leg, for example, that are stability, while the other side is mobility, I have also seen that some people can have, for example, their right leg be their stability leg, while their left arm is their stability arm. There is no 100% way that people organize themselves. There is the average, and then there's the rest of us. So again, please roll onto your right sides. And bring your attention down to your pelvis, returning to the idea of raising your pelvis towards your shoulder on the left and away from it. Just reminding yourself of this up and down movement. Good. Great. And what would be the other direction that you might move your pelvis in? So there's up and down. If you were to mimic what you were doing with your shoulder, how would you bring the left side of your pelvis forward and back? Lengthening your left knee. So your left leg slides on your right leg, your pelvis rolls forward, and then it slides backwards on your right leg, as if your left leg is getting shorter as your pelvis rolls backward. Forwards and back. For some people this is difficult. We've often lost contact with the variety of three-dimensional mobility that we have in our pelvis. And returning to this mobility gives us balance and strength and coordination. But allowing for awareness and movement in our pelvis has had all kinds of cultural layers of ideas that we've inherited. So freeing this up can free up a lot of movement patterns that cause difficulty in one's life. So just rest on your side again and bring your attention back to your left shoulder. And very slowly begin making a circle. So you're connecting the dots, sliding your shoulder forward and then upward, backward, and downward. And you can make this circle as small or as large as you want. But notice your tendency. Is it to do it right the way you think, I think it's best? Is it to do a big movement so you'll get more out of the lesson? Is it to stretch? Or is it to find pleasure? And I would invite you to make the movement in whatever way brings you the most pleasure. Pleasure might be in the interest, in the variety, in the shape. Because few of you are going to make a pure, perfect, symmetrical circle. In fact, probably none of you. So notice your unique way of creating a circle with these movements in your shoulder. And then notice your unique way of feeling how your neck, how your back, how your chest and ribs are connected to the circle that you're making with your shoulder. And then reverse the circle. Notice, is it easier going the reverse direction, or maybe it's a little harder, a little less smooth, more flat spots? And imagine that you are taking your shoulder through a clock. So when you raise your shoulder up towards your ear, when you're at the top of the circle, it's at 12 o'clock. Let's put 9 o'clock forward. 6 o'clock is down towards your pelvis, and 3 o'clock is behind you. So imagine each of those numbers on the circle. So if you're coming up to 12 o'clock and then going forward, you're going counterclockwise through 9, down through 6, backwards and up through 3, and up all the way to 12. And then just rest for a moment. And keep the image of the clock in the movements of your shoulder, and just take your shoulder right up to 12 and right down to 6. Now can you take it to 11, just slightly forward of 12, and down to 5, slightly behind 6, up to 10, over to 4, up to 9. I'm going to throw you off here, over to 1, down to 6, up to 10, over to 4, to 7, and relax. Great way to get out of your habitual way of holding your shoulder if you're feeling the stress accumulate. Now, how about your pelvis? How would you make this circle in your pelvis? Going forward, upward, backward, and downward. Can you feel the circular potential? And you might need to make it very small. Very large. There might be certain movements that you can't do comfortably, so don't. You might have to do some of it in your imagination. Your comfort and pleasure is the most important thing to keeping the static of pain and old patterns out of your nervous system. And reverse the direction in your pelvis. Feeling all the movement in your lower back, in your ribs. How does your pelvis speak to your shoulder blades, your shoulder, up into your head as you take it in circles? And rest. Notice, have you been working hard, or have you been playing lightly? Now bring the shoulder and the pelvis towards each other. Bring them both forward. Bring them both apart from each other and backwards. So your whole body is moving in a circle. Together, forward, away, backwards. Sort of wiggling like a worm. Feeling those ribs come together on one side, pressing into the floor and opening on the other side.
No, is she still starting it?
And then reverse directions. What's it like in the other direction? Keep wriggling. And just pause for a moment. Now, what if you took them opposite directions? So, shoulder and hip away from each other. Shoulder forward, hip backwards. Towards each other. Shoulder backwards, hip forwards. Only do this if you can do it playfully and lightly. Otherwise, just do it in your imagination. But if you can play even a little bit with it, just feel all the diversity of movement happening in your gut. Are you breathing? Is your jaw soft? Is your head following the movements? And can you reverse that? Playfully and lightly. And let it go and roll onto your back. Feeling your sides, noticing right away, where does your attention go? Are you addicted to noticing what feels good or not? Do you notice what's interesting? Do you notice what you don't notice? Are you critical of yourself or of the teacher? Or supportive and pleased with yourself for taking the time out of your busy life to de-stress and reconnect into your body, into your being, into yourself? Very gently, just an inch or two, raise your left arm up and drop it onto the floor, doing that a couple times. And then compare that to the right side. What's different? And then roll on to your left side. For this lesson, we will not go through all of the movements in this side. So I suggest at another time you re-listen to this recording, or just lie on the floor and remember whatever you can. What do you remember about the movements of the shoulder? How they connect to the head? How eventually they connect down into the pelvis and even the foot. What do you remember about the ribs and how they close on one side and open on the other side? What do you remember about lifting the foot and how it supports movement in your pelvis and into your ribs? What can you sense about the mobility of one side and the support and stability being provided by the other side? What do you remember about all the circles, all your unique patterns and shapes and configurations, your gentle playfulness? Your ability to catch yourself in the kinds of words and phrases you say to yourself, the kind ones, the happy ones, the not so kind ones, the judgmental ones. And your ability to let those go and just come back into the connection of your being. Here. Being here now. And from your side, just take your time and come up into sitting and standing. Staying with your experience, seeing what percolates for you, what draws your attention, and giving yourself as many moments as you need to walk around and just stay in the sensations, the new connections made from this lesson. Until next time, thank you.